You've been told that putting money into a retirement account is one of the smartest financial moves you can make. The tax benefit is real. The employer match is real. The compound growth over decades is real. Every financial advisor, every HR presentation, every personal finance article points in the same direction. Contribute early, contribute consistently, and your future self will thank you. And so you did. For years, maybe decades, you increased your contribution percentage when you got promoted. You rebalanced when the market moved. You made responsible decisions sequentially over a long period of time because that is what the evidence said to do. But here is the contradiction nobody mentions during benefits enrollment. You can put money into that account anytime you want. The door in is always open. The door out has a lock on it, and the key belongs to someone else. You cannot access that money on your own terms. Not before a specific age. Not without a 10% penalty on whatever you withdraw. Not without the entire amount being taxed as ordinary income in the year you take it. Regardless of how long it took you to accumulate, the rules for entering this system and the rules for exiting it are structurally different. That asymmetry is not a design flaw. It is the design. The architecture was built deliberately. And the cost of not understanding it isn't measured in penalties, it's measured in the decisions you stop being able to make. You log into your financial portal, and the number is there. Substantial, growing. Years of disciplined contributions stacked on top of each other, compounding quietly in the background. That number feels like freedom. It feels like options. It feels like proof that you've been doing this correctly. The feeling is not wrong. The assumption underneath it is, because what you're looking at is not a liquid asset in any conventional sense of the word. It is a deferred claim, a contract with specific conditions attached. You have the right to that money, but only on a schedule determined by a tax code written decades before you started contributing to it. Think about how you actually use that number. It shows up on your net worth calculation. It makes the overall picture look strong. It creates a kind of psychological buffer, a sense that even if things got difficult, there's something substantial behind you, and that buffer is real in a narrow sense. The money exists, it is growing, and you will eventually be able to access it on favorable terms. But it is not real in the sense that matters most in a moment of decision. If an opportunity appeared tomorrow, a business you could buy, a role that required you to walk away from your current salary for 18 months, a pivot that made sense in every way except that it required capital, you could move quickly. That number on your retirement account statement would not behave like an asset, it would behave like a cost. Every dollar you pulled from it would arrive smaller than it left, and the gap between the balance and what you actually receive would belong to a system you never negotiated with. The money is yours in the same way that a house you can't sell is yours. The ownership is real. The access is conditional. Most people don't test that distinction until they need to, and by then, the terms have already been fixed. The mechanism has a precise structure. Call it what it is. Deferred control. The 401k began in 1978 as a minor provision in the tax code, originally a mechanism to allow executives to defer compensation and reduce their immediate tax burden. It was not designed as a mass retirement vehicle. Its expansion into the default savings instrument for the American middle class happened quickly and largely replaced the traditional defined benefit pension. That shift had a clear logic for the institutions involved. Pensions were a liability. They obligated companies to pay a fixed amount for life, regardless of market performance, regardless of how long the employee lived, regardless of what happened to the company itself. The 401k transferred that liability to the employee. You became responsible for your own investment decisions, your own market exposure, your own longevity risk. The company's obligation became finite. Match a percentage up to a cap, and then the responsibility is yours. For financial institutions, this shift was structurally significant. It created vast, stable pools of capital flowing in year after year, locked in for decades. The incentive to keep those assets inside the system to discourage withdrawal is embedded in the fee structure. Every dollar under management generates a return for the institution. Every early withdrawal is a dollar that leaves. The 10% penalty doesn't go to a neutral third party. The tax treatment on early withdrawal ordinary income rates, plus the penalty creates a combined cost that can reach 30 to 35 cents on the dollar before you see the rest. The government's interest runs parallel. Incentivized long-term saving theoretically reduces future reliance on public retirement programs. It defers tax collection while keeping capital circulating through institutional channels that are easier to regulate and tax than individual cash holdings. The arrangement works cleanly for both parties. You get a tax benefit now. You surrender direct access for decades. That is the trade. One line. That is the whole trade. What feels like an asset on your balance sheet functions more like a long-term loan to the system, repayable to you at a time and on terms that you did not negotiate. Consider two people, both 44 years old. Both have been contributing to their 401k since their late 20s. Take a household where both partners earn well-combined income around $280,000. No children. The kind of household that has, by any measure, done everything correctly. One of them, call her the one who got the offer, is presented with an opportunity to join an early-stage company in a field she's spent 15 years building expertise in. The equity terms are serious. The salary cut is significant. Roughly 35% for the first 2 years while the company establishes its next funding round. They've run the numbers. It's viable, but it requires capital something in the range of $90,000 to cover the gap and make a modest personal investment in the company at founder terms. Their liquid savings are healthy, but not deep enough to absorb that without leaving them exposed. The largest single pool of accessible capital in their financial life sits in retirement accounts. She has, conservatively, $420,000 in her 401k. She calls the institution. The math comes back quickly. An early withdrawal of $90,000 triggers a mandatory 10% penalty, $9,000, immediately. That $90,000 is then treated as ordinary income. At their combined bracket, federal taxes on that amount run somewhere between 22 and 24%. Add state taxes, depending on where they live, another 5 to 8%. The total cost of accessing $90,000 of her own money she contributed, money that grew under her name, is somewhere between $28,000 and $32,000 in penalties and taxes combined. To net $90,000, she would need to withdraw closer to $125,000. She doesn't feel deceived. She feels the precision of a system she hadn't fully read. After the call, she pulls up their full financial picture. Not just the 401k everything, the home equity, the brokerage account, the cash savings, the 401k balance. She adds it up. The total looks substantial. Then she runs a different calculation. How much of this can we actually move in the next 30 days without a significant penalty, without disrupting something essential? The number is much smaller, less than a quarter of what the full balance sheet showed. The rest is real. It exists. It's growing, but it isn't capital in any operational sense. It's a balance. And a balance is not the same thing as leverage. The decision they ultimately make, whether they proceed with the withdrawal, take on debt, pass on the opportunity, or find a third path, is not the point. The point is that the constraint itself changed the decision set, an asset that appeared on her balance sheet as flexible capital turned out, under pressure, to be something closer to illiquid. The number was real. The access was not. Scale this across the population. There are tens of millions of households in a similar position, upper middle income, disciplined savers, a substantial portion of their net worth held in tax-deferred accounts. For many of them, retirement accounts represent the single largest financial asset outside of their primary residence. That capital in aggregate, trillions of dollars, sits in managed accounts, generating fees, enabling institutional investment strategies, supporting a financial industry whose stability depends in part on that capital staying exactly where it is. The system does not need those individuals to understand this arrangement clearly. It needs them to feel secure enough to keep contributing. The quarterly statement showing growth serves that function. The employer match reinforces it. The tax benefit makes the initial decision easy. What the enrollment presentation does not cover is the exit architecture, the fact that the conditions for access were written by parties whose interests are not identical to yours. There's a second-order effect that rarely gets discussed. Because a significant portion of high-earning households carry most of their wealth in these illiquid accounts, the actual velocity of capital available to them for non-retirement purposes is lower than their income or total net worth would suggest. This has a quiet effect on career decisions, on entrepreneurial risk-taking, on the willingness to leave a job that pays well but has stopped being anything else. The golden handcuff, in its traditional form, is a stock vesting schedule, a concrete, visible incentive to stay. This version is less visible. You don't stay because of a vesting cliff. You stay because the largest pool of capital you have accumulated is inaccessible without a cost that changes the calculation. The constraint doesn't announce itself. It operates as background friction against any decision that would require you to access it early. You don't feel trapped. You feel responsible. Think about how that friction compounds over time. Someone considers leaving a senior role at 48, not because they have nothing to go to, but because they've been offered something that pays less for 2 years and significantly more after that. They run the numbers. The liquid assets cover maybe 8 months. The retirement account covers the rest, on paper. But the real cost of accessing it early, the penalties, the taxes, the lost compounding on whatever they withdraw, shifts the math enough that the move stops making sense. So they stay. Another year, another 2. Not because the job is right, because the capital structure of their financial life makes leaving too expensive. The system didn't force that decision. It just made the alternative cost more than it should. That's a different kind of lock one, with no visible mechanism, no signed agreement, no moment where you consciously gave up the option. It accumulated quietly, one responsible contribution at a time. The distinction between those two experiences is exactly what the system depends on. Run the numbers in your own situation. Of your total financial assets right now, what percentage is in accounts with early withdrawal penalties? What percentage is fully liquid accessible within a week, without a cost, without a permission structure? For most households at this income level, the liquid portion is smaller than it appears when you look at the total balance. The number on the statement and the number you can actually deploy are different numbers. Not dramatically different in normal circumstances, dramatically different in the moments when it matters most, when the opportunity has a short window, when the pivot requires capital, when staying costs more than the penalty of leaving. This is not an argument against contributing to retirement accounts. The tax treatment is real. The employer match, where it exists, is real. The compound growth over 20 or 30 years is real. For a large portion of the population, these accounts remain the most efficient long-term savings vehicle available within the current system. The argument is about precision, about what you're actually holding when you hold these accounts, about the difference between ownership as a legal category and control as a practical one. Those two things are not the same. The system benefits from you treating them as if they are. And the cost of that conflation is not paid evenly. It's paid most heavily in the years when your options are widest, your energy is highest, and your ability to act quickly on a different kind of future is at its peak. You came into this understanding retirement savings as a form of wealth accumulation, money you set aside, money you own, money that becomes available to you when you need it in the future. That framing is the one the system gives you. It is not technically wrong. It is structurally incomplete. The more accurate description is this: a retirement account is a time-locked contract with asymmetric access conditions. You can always put money in. Getting money out before the designated date costs you a defined percentage of the withdrawal, plus ordinary income tax treatment, plus whatever opportunity you forfeit in the time it takes to rebuild the capital you lost to penalties and taxes. The access conditions were set not by you, but by a tax code written in 1978, amended by regulatory bodies, and administered by financial institutions that have a measurable interest in your continued participation. The freedom these accounts promise is real, but it begins at a specific age, 59 and a half, under current rules defined not by your circumstances, not by your needs, not by any assessment of your situation, by a number in the tax code. Before that point, the money exists as a balance. It does not exist as leverage, not as the kind of capital you can deploy quickly when a decision window is short, not as the liquidity buffer that separates a constrained choice from a genuine one. There is a version of financial security that looks like a high balance and is actually a set of conditions. And there is a version that looks like a lower balance but functions as real optionality money that moves when you need it to move without a 30-cent penalty built into each dollar. The distinction is not visible on a net worth statement. It becomes visible only when the timeline shifts, when the opportunity is real. When you go to use the money as capital and find out, at that moment, what you actually own. The question was never whether you could afford it. It was whether you could afford to stop. What's one financial asset you've been counting as liquid that, under real pressure, would turn out not to be? There are systems that operate exactly this way, not just in your retirement accounts. The architecture is larger than one mechanism, and the people who've mapped it tend to make different decisions than the people who haven't.